during the COVID-19 pandemic, before the COVID-19 pandemic, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Michigan will continue to be heavily affected by politics at the national, state, and local level. And to talk about all of those levels of politics and all the details and the chaos that continues to be our political lives is Dave Dulio, the professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. Joining us once again. Dave, thanks for being back with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Tyler. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well. So I think the first thing we'll want to talk to you about today is that this morning, James Craig, the former police chief in the city of Detroit, was formally announcing his candidacy for governor on the Republican ticket, of course. And interesting that that was met with a lot of opposition already this morning, as that was scheduled to start at 10 a.m. They met a lot of delays as protesters lined up in front of the ceremony. It took about 10 minutes of a delay before they were able to get things back in order and get Chief Craig speaking at his event, as protesters were on Belle Isle's Sunset Point on foot and chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, James Craig has got to go." So already some stark opposition to James Craig, but he's a candidate that's got a lot of potential for the Republican Party, and somebody that a lot in the Republican Party at the state and at the national level believe could be a very competitive person to go up against Governor Whitmer in the 2022 gubernatorial election.
Absolutely. I think that, today with the formal announcement, we get rid of the worst kept secret in Michigan politics, right? That James Craig was going to run for governor. And you're right. There are many Republicans who look at his candidacy as a breath of fresh air and a fresh new face in politics in Michigan, and in particular in Republican politics. I think that this won't be the last time James Craig is confronted by protesters. I'm struggling to remember if I can come up with another example of somebody who was heckled at an announcement speech by, from what it looks like in the news reports, less than a dozen or so folks that tried to spoil his day in the sun here.
We're joined by Dave Dulio. He is the professor of political science, and he is the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, as we talk about politics and, of course, James Craig's formal announcement today that he is going to be running for governor on the Republican ticket. At least he'll be in the primaries. Nothing's official with that party declaration. Other candidates in the Republican Party that have already announced or are seeking the Republican nomination for governor are Michigan State Police Captain Mike Brown of Stevensville, conservative cable television commentator Tudor Dixon of Muskegon County, and Ottawa County real estate agent Ryan Kelly, as well as many others. And so Chief Craig met with some opposition this morning, presumably a lot of the same people that were dissatisfied with the Detroit Police Department's response to the Black Lives Matter protests in the summer of 2020. And there were even some chants of Black Lives Matter this morning at that protest. There was a chant of James Craig is full of hate. We won't let him win our state. So that opposition early on, especially in the city of Detroit, where it is something that's so critical to the Republican strategy in Michigan, not only in this gubernatorial election, but really going forward, is that a potential detractor for the Republican Party to potentially nominate James Craig, Chief Craig, at some point down the line for the nomination for governor?
Well, I think that it cuts both ways, right? I think James Craig is an incredibly credible candidate on issues that relate to law and order, to public safety, those sorts of things. And while there are individuals in the city who weren't happy with the police department's response or activity in the summer of 2020 when the protests were going on, there are others in other parts of the state that are happy with them and that want to see somebody come into politics and talk about public safety, law and order, and those sorts of issues. And I think that in a suburban area, those are much more likely to be positive signs than negatives. It's all about, at the end of the day, when we talk about elections, how many of those voters turn out and cast a ballot.
And that's why Detroit's going to be such a competitive place for the gubernatorial election. It was a huge factor in turning the state blue in 2020 with the presidential election, and it's something that's a great focus, particularly for the Republican Party, which creates a new dynamic as well for the Democratic Party, where they also have to take a greater focus on the city of Detroit, a place that previously they've kind of just had. They've had the city of Detroit. They've had to focus more of their energy in other counties, such as Oakland County, especially over the last couple of elections, where it's been more of a purple county than a red county or a blue county, and they really focused on flipping Oakland County, one of the state's largest. But the city of Detroit, now that it is such a great focus for the Republican Party, especially when you have a viable candidate like the former police chief James Craig potentially on the ticket for the Republican governorship, that makes the city of Detroit an even greater focus for the Democrats, where before they pretty much knew they had the city of Detroit being blue.
Well, and let's not kid ourselves, right? The city of Detroit is still going to overwhelmingly vote Democratic.
Sure.
But what James Craig may be able to do, should he be the nominee, right? You ticked off some of the other candidates in that Republican primary. There are others who are going to be formidable, and not let James Craig just walk away with this thing. And I think you got to look at Garrett Soldano as one, and potentially Kevin Rinke as another for different reasons, right? Mr. Soldano has very effectively led the Unlock Michigan movement and led to that ballot initiative that was eventually approved by the legislature. And Mr. Rinke, of course, is capable of funding a campaign that other candidates are likely not able to, in a way that other candidates are not able to do. But let's assume that James Craig gets through, right? The city of Detroit's still going to vote overwhelmingly Democratic, as I said, but what he may be able to do is, make Democrats spend more time in Detroit than they would like, which means that they're not spending time in places like Oakland County and Kent County, time and money for that matter. And in addition, if James Craig is the nominee and can pull out 15-17% of the vote in Detroit, that's a big win for him. It may not get him all the way over the top in terms of votes needed to win, but that would be better than other Republicans have done in the city in recent years, including Donald Trump, who actually saw his numbers go up in Detroit from 2016 to 2020. So maybe there's a way to capitalize on that for the Craig campaign. That remains to be seen.
We're joined by Dave Dulio. He's the professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, with us on the MegaCast. And related to the gubernatorial election issue is our COVID-19 issues. And in the state of Michigan, Governor Whitmer, especially of late, but really over the last several months and the majority of this year, has been very hesitant to take any further steps forward in COVID-19 regulations or precautions through the Health and Human Services Department or by any other means. And considering the blowback on the local level from health mandates such as mask mandates in schools here in Oakland County and in many other large counties here in the state of Michigan, and as well as from the blowback of that, from the federal mandates of either extensive testing or vaccination for federal workers from President Joe Biden, a political ally of the governor. Is there a reason that you have been able to identify from the governor's perspective on a strategic front why she's kind of taking a more laissez-faire approach to COVID-19? Is it because of the election? Because that's what draws me to that first. That's the first thing that draws my eye as a potential reason for that, is because she's taken a lot of hits during the pandemic and is trying to tamper that down as much as possible to be able to put her best foot forward for a tough 2022 election where she may not even be going in as the favorite.
Well, I think she'll be the favorite, just as an incumbent. That carries great weight and great advantage when you're seeking another term. I think that the question of is it politics is I'm a cynic, and we've talked about this before, right? That I see politics everywhere. So of course I see it here as well. And how big of a factor is it? Only the governor knows that. I do think that the mandate that just came down from the White House in terms of vaccination requirements for employees that work at companies that have more than 100 people is going to impact the discussion here in Michigan. And it could be that it takes a little bit of heat off of the governor, where she can now say, well, that wasn't me, that was Washington. And we don't have any choice, we just have to do it. But I also think that there's a long way to go before this mandate gets really implemented, because it has to go through, even in an expedited manner, a process, a rulemaking process in the federal executive branch that deals with all of the practical applications of this mandate. It's one thing for the president to say all companies with 100 or more employees have to mandate vaccination. It's another thing for that to actually roll out and become a reality, in addition to the certain court challenges that are coming on that issue. And there will be great debate about this as well. There have been court cases in the past about mandates like this, but those have been focused on the state level, where the states have made those mandates, not the federal government. So there's going to be there's a lot left to play out with that federal mandate.
We're joined by Dave Dulio. He is a professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. And Dave, on another big national issue of late has been abortion, particularly the survival or potential end of Roe versus Wade, a 1973 decision by the Supreme Court that did affirm the allowance of abortions from the federal level. Now, Texas passed a bill that bans abortions after 6 weeks. This is something that's getting a lot of attention because presumably it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and with the Supreme Court being inherently it's supposed to be politically neutral, but it is not politically neutral. It never is. Like you said, you're a cynic, I'm a cynic. Everything is politics, and that includes the Supreme Court, which is why we have such great debate when Supreme Court openings are about, and why we have such opposition from opposing political parties to the president who appoints these justices. Recently, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was appointed by, of course, President Donald Trump before the 2020 election, says the Supreme Court, quote, is not a bunch of partisan hacks and is defined by judicial philosophies instead of personal political views. But at the same time, the majority of those on the Supreme Court were appointed by Republicans. There could potentially, by the time that this is being discussed, it could be election season. Do you believe that the Supreme Court, with its current justices, especially those that have gone against quote-unquote party lines, and have had opposing views to the president that appointed them, in that case being, of course, Justice Coney Barrett and others, that this abortion issue is going to become really hot at the federal level because there's such a Republican majority on the Supreme Court, and Republicans generally are against abortions altogether?
Well, I think anytime abortion is part of the agenda, it's a hot button issue, and it becomes incredibly relevant. It's an issue that folks on both sides are very passionate about. I think that one thing, Justice Coney Barrett's her comments about it not being a bunch of partisan hacks, that she's not the first justice to say that, and she won't be the last. I mean, there are, and there's great evidence of that too, right? The vast majority of Supreme Court decisions are not 5-4 or even 6-3. They're much more one-sided than that. It's just those are the ones that we hear about. Those are the ones that the media cover because there's conflict there. I would also say too that there have been some of the Republican nominated justices have frustrated the conservative side of the spectrum in recent years. John Roberts, the Chief Justice, has routinely gone against his, this may not be the best term, but co-partisans, right? I mean, he's gone against other Republican nominated judges. Gorsuch has done it on occasion. Kavanaugh has done it on occasion, right? So it's and we also see that the liberal justices do the same. But it's when the issue of abortion comes up and the court is tilted in the way that it is now, with 6 Republican nominated judges and 3 Democratic nominated judges, some will take that as, hey, look, we gotta really pay attention to this, and the doubts of those who are behind Roe versus Wade are peaked.
Yeah, certainly, and the abortion issue is gonna be a big focus here in the state of Michigan in the 2022 elections because of the current layout of the Supreme Court, being that it's a 6-3 Republican majority, for lack of better terms, even though the court is supposed to remain neutral. And generally, as you said, it's going to become a bigger issue because of the 10th Amendment. If Roe versus Wade should be repealed by the U.S. Supreme Court, at that point, the precedent on abortion-related issues would roll back to individual state laws, and currently Michigan's previous law that was in place before Roe versus Wade was not in favor of abortion. We're joined by Dave Dulio. He's the director for the Center of Civic Engagement at Oakland University and their political science professor. Dave, another minute with you before we'll say goodbye today. What's coming up at the Center for Civic Engagement? We've got a lot of these hot topics, a lot of heated debates that are ongoing and will continue to be ongoing. And over there at Oakland University, you're trying to tame down the flames instead of fan them, and we need to know what's coming up.
Well, we are, and thanks for the opportunity. We're going to rekindle our Civic Engagement Office Hours series, where we feature faculty experts at OU, and we're going to do a couple things the rest of this calendar year in that series, one on drug trafficking and one on the media and misinformation, disinformation with some of our faculty experts. We just wrapped up a series of 9/11 remembrance events, including a discussion with Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin and former Congressman Mike Rogers, so one Democrat, one Republican, about their history with 9/11, their comments on how it changed the nation, how it changed the world, and frankly, given the last month or so of activity in Afghanistan, what that means for the United States moving forward on the terrorism front. If folks weren't able to catch that, they can watch a recording of it that they can get on our Facebook page. We're at OUCCE. So they can go to that page, find that video, and take a look at what our current representative and a former had to say.
Dave, we appreciate it. Thanks for being on with us. That is going to do it for today's edition of the MegaCast. Big thank you to our crew on Civic Center TV. The Splash with Maddie Mushkin is next. On My TV, it is Steve Leto live, and we'll be back here tomorrow live at 10 a.m.